she's speaking for a variety of co-authors.
Yes, and so speaking of the variety of co-authors, I'll talk about each of their contributions as I go, but just in case I forget to do that, Mark Boccuzzi, thank you very much at Windbridge Institute for being such a great engineer, a software engineer, and having also wonderful ideas for our collaborative experiments. But I also wanted to point out everything that I'm presenting here, when you say speak for, I'm not actually speaking for them. They don't actually know what I'm about to say. These are all my analyses. They could totally disagree. So I'm speaking sort of with them, and perhaps I'm being spoken through, right? So who knows? So the top three questions that people ask me when they learn that I study precognition and other kind of psi things, but mostly precognition, is what percentage of the population have this skill? What kinds of people have it, and can it be learned? All of the answers to these questions are both known and unknown, depending on how specific you want to be. And the whole reason they're asking these is because they're thinking of this. They're thinking of movies like this and TV shows like Minority. This is Minority Report. This is a great movie with Tom Cruise. These are the precogs that float in a vat of goo, and they predict future crimes before they're committed, so you can arrest people before they commit the crime. Obviously, this is a problem. But anyway, that problem is confronted in the movie. They're kind of scared of this, and they feel it. Generally, in the conversation, it's revealed that they've had experiences. They're scared of them. They feel them inside themselves. They worry that they're normal or whether they're crazy, and they think of things like this. And what it ends up producing in me are some questions that are different than those three questions, which are, if we scale up participant number, does this improve the signal-to-noise ratio of getting psi effects? So if you get a ton, so when I talk to my mainstream colleagues in the field, when I tell them about everyone's scared of psi, I want to kind of normalize psi, I want people to get it that this is really scientifically reasonable, and there's evidence for it. They say, well, just get 10,000 subjects on the internet and just prove it once and for all. So, let's try that and see if the signal-noise ratio actually scales or doesn't. What biases prevent us from understanding and using our own psi? It's clear that psi exists, so what biases are preventing us? And 3, can we use tools to get over these biases and strengthen the signal? So let's talk about these. I'm going to present really quickly, and I'm hoping that you drank your coffee. I'm going to be speaking quickly. We can sort of mentally rewind and replay later, I think. But I'm going to be talking about 3 experiments using online tools. One is an app-based experiment that I'll explain that looks at implicit precognition, so unconscious precognition, explicit precognition, and micro-psychokinesis. One is a combination experiment, an on-location hypnosis experiment, also using online controlled, what I call controlled precog, which is remote viewing of a precognitive target, and online-only controlled precog, or remote viewing of the precognitive target. So the first one is this app. I'll just walk right in front there, because I can't stand to just stay on one side of the room. Hi, everyone over here. Is this app called Psi3 or Psi Cubed. It used to be called PsyQ, like IQ for Psi, but then Institute of Noetic Sciences gave it to Mossbridge Institute, and I changed the name to Psi3, Psi Cubed. It's the same app. It has 3 games. If you take a picture of that QR code, you can download it from the App Store. Right now, not on Android. This is the first game. It's called Heart Quest, which is about making this robot have a glowing heart. You're sending love to the robot by pressing the screen. You can press anywhere on the screen. What's going on behind the scenes is there's a template at the beginning of each game. Each game lasts 10 trials. And the template is randomly chosen. It's 2 bits. So in this case, I'm showing a 0 and a 1 for those bits. Each trial, when you press on the screen, if your 2 bits match the template, that's the best score you can get, and the heart glows, right? If only one of your 2 bits matches the template, then it gets a little glowing. And if neither matches, it kind of looks dark and miserable, and the robot actually frowns. So it's a micro-PK task. And this, just so you know, this game was made in collaboration with Dean Radin, Arno Delorme, and other folks at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So it's a collaboration of a lot of ideas. So here's the result. Basic psi missing. And in an interesting way that I'm going to explain that suggests there's an interesting bias going on. So the number of times in which these are like 75,511 presses on this screen, the number of times where both of the bits match the template bits. So I just said that word. I meant bits. Sorry. the number of trials, it's always good to just swear randomly and then apologize. What can I say? So the number of trials below chance, you can see on this scale about 500 trials below what you would expect by chance for both of them matching. So that's psi missing at the double match sort of level. Where one match is actually, there's more than 600 above chance. Again, psi matching into the more mundane, like trying to pack things into the more mundane single match area. And no change or difference in the no match. So the bias here is interesting. It's away from the positive feedback. So let's go back here. These differences are not apparent in the bits. They're only apparent in the combined value of the bits, which is used to determine the feedback. Furthermore, because there's no difference here, that's away from the positive feedback. Super interesting. So let's keep that in mind, that what we saw here was the people apparently are moving very slightly away from the sort of desired goal when they're massively tested. Okay, let's look at this other game called Future Feelings. Daryl Bem, you might be familiar with his work at Cornell. One of the things that he put out into the world is a retroactive priming experiment. So a regular priming experiment is an ancient sort of psychology experiment in which you show an image, let's say it's a positive or negative image, and just before that image you flash a word on the screen, and the word can either be congruent with the image or not. And after you see the image, you respond, was that a positive or negative image? And the level of congruency determines the response time. So you respond more quickly when the word would match the image than when it didn't. So Daryl Bem reversed this in time. So we copied this here. You flash an image, click the face that matches the image mood, negative, positive, and then that response is followed by a word that either does or doesn't match the image in terms of its affect, or sort of, let's just say it's affect. So this has been a controversial experiment because sometimes it's replicated and sometimes it isn't. And I think generally people use Daryl Bem's software to analyze the data, which just puts them all in a big pool and pops out with the answer. But there's this giant bias when you actually look at this data. Like, there's 60 milliseconds faster response to positive images than to negative images, at least in my data set. The p-value is essentially 0. There's 16 zeros before anything happens with that p-value. This is a giant bias. And if you just slam together these positive and negative images, you're going to get crap a lot of the time, right? So what you need to do is, so Barbara McClintock won the Nobel Prize for discovering jumping genes. And she was famous for walking through her cornfields because she worked with maize. She was famous for walking through her cornfields for like 16 hours a day to get to know her organism. So she said, I know my corn plants intimately, and I find it a great pleasure to know them. And that's what I think there's a problem when people just shove data into an algorithm and don't sit with it and look with it and feel it. Because when you feel it, you can find these biases. Anyway, so when I baselined in response to this huge bias, guess what? You get significantly away from feedback psi missing. Huh. So the normal or sort of the usual response is you get more faster responses with a congruent when the word matches the picture, and not so fast or slower responses with incongruent. This is the reverse. The p-value is very small. It's so disappointing with 98,530 trials, a p-value less than 0.045. It's like, might as well not even mention, but it is away from, once you take into account this baseline, it's away from the feedback, which is interesting. Okay, last game of this set of experiments is hidden gurus. So you have a field that looks like it's a space scene, and your job is to click on the field somewhere where you think one of these, I don't know if you can see this little bird, but one of these little images, they're called masters or gurus, show up. That's the game. It's not super exciting, but none of these are. But it's testing for precognition. So right before this appears, of course, and after you've clicked, a random number generator is deciding where to stick that master. And just to show you that it's truly random, this is not just a nice little logo. This is actually the proportion of trials in each of those 4 quadrants. So that does not match where people actually touch. So the bias is incredible. So in the upper right-hand quadrant, this is the preferred position to touch. This is the second preferred, third preferred, and fourth preferred. If those correspond to these quadrants, these sizes represent the number of people who are touching and the number of times they're touching. Those highly statistically significant. So you have to take into account that bias, because otherwise your results are going to be arbitrarily reflecting this bias because you didn't know it was there, right? So once you do that, so you look at each of those quadrants and you compare it to the other quadrants based on the bias, what would be expected, you can see that only in this lower right quadrant is there any precognitive activity going on that's statistically significant. And it is absolutely going to be washed out in the general score because, of course, they're pressing in all these other quadrants. So people won't even know they're doing well, which is why I think it's significantly towards the feedback in this quadrant, because it could be hidden from the users. So I think it's really interesting. And interesting, even more interesting, I did the big five on everyone who used the app. And the conscientious people are the ones who are carrying this effect. Now, also, conscientious people are some of the few people who actually filled out the big five because they're conscientious. So I also think it's very interesting that they might be the ones who would ignore their usual bias and actually listen to a psi signal. So that's super interesting to me. So I think that we're dealing with psi fear, or fear of psi. When people are in the context of, I'm showing them this game, here, this will test your psi ability. Talk about performance anxiety. Talk about fear of what this could mean. You're alone. You might be in your car, right? So I just think that's what we're talking about. So I'm inspired by Marie Curie, who said, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. OK, so how do we deal with fear of psi? Here's my top 3 questions. Oh, back to my top 3 questions. So if we scale up participant number, does it improve the signal-to-noise ratio? No, it seems like noise scales. This is really, really disappointing, at least in this case. What biases prevent us from understanding and using our own psi? Fear of psi, performance anxiety, and also these much more dominant biases that we better take into account when we're analyzing the data. And 3, can we use tools to get over such biases and strengthen the signal? I don't know, we haven't talked about that. Let's find out. So first tool is, I thought of as hypnosis. So can hypnosis circumvent the fear of psi? Get people into a state where they're more self-accepting and maybe feel like they have that capability and they're less dominated by this performance anxiety. So I did a in-office hypnosis experiment with Adam Crabtree, who's the hypnotherapist for Esalen. He's in Toronto. And in his office, he acted as my research assistant, and he hypnotized a group of 35 people in a crossover design. So everyone went to these 2 sessions. In one session, they got a hypnotic suggestion for unconditional love, to experience unconditional love. In another one, they got a hypnotic suggestion to experience better precognition. Okay? So the unconditional love idea is if you get people into this state where they're not in a state of fear and they're accepting of who they are and they're feeling this connection, that might be psi-conducive. And if you just simply tell people, you're now going to be better at precognition, that might be psi-conducive too. The pre-test and post-test were the same for both of the sessions, those app tasks I just described, and a very brief remote viewing task. They had 2 minutes to draw what they thought a picture would be, using an online target pool created by Daz Smith, I believe, called Remote Viewed Target Monkey. So the result is above chance performance on precognitive remote viewing. In the unconditional love condition, these are the same participants. In the precog suggestion condition, it's at chance. I'm not going to talk about the app results right now. I'm questioning some of my analyses, so I'll talk about them another time. But this is noticed that this is happening before the unconditional love suggestion. Before, right? So this is just hilarious. So I keep thinking, what I think is going on is something like this. So you push down here, like almost like size, like this fluid thing, or precog anyway, is like this fluid thing. And this is how we deal with hydraulics, right? You push down here, and it's got an equal force coming up here, but it could be spread over this area. And you push down here, and instead of looking here where you think it's supposed to have this effect, you better be looking over there. And this could be in time, and this could be in space, right? The difference between these 2 areas. So there's So is it going backwards in time, right? Is that, I mean, yeah, 5 more minutes, awesome. Is it going backwards in time? And the suggestion going backwards in time, 1. 2, are people just because they're told, now you're about to be hypnotized to experience unconditional love, they're like, oh, that's relaxing. I don't have to worry about precognition because that's the other condition. And, it's possible, right? Or is there something else going on? It's just one, it'd be interesting to replicate and actually not do the suggestion and see if they have the same, they're just told they'll be hypnotized, but, we'll see. So back to my top 3 questions. The first question is not applicable here. We only have 35 participants. What biases? All the same stuff. But these are psi seekers. The hypnotherapist mentioned that they were all very excited to prove that they're so very psychic. In these psi seekers, especially there was performance anxiety, I think, that could definitely explain the results. And can we use tools to get over them? Maybe. Maybe unconditional love or the mention of it might be one of the tools. So on to the next one. Oh, the other thing is training. Yes, I love that I put these quotes in here to remind me what I was supposed to say. Mary Daly, who was the first African-American PhD in chemistry in the US, said, courage is a habit, a virtue. You get it by courageous acts. It's like you learn to swim by swimming. You learn to courage by couraging. Well, people learn to remote view by remote viewing and by getting explicit training that puts them in a frame, like Mark said, a set and setting that allows them to feel okay about being quote unquote wrong or not hitting the target and to understand that practice is part of the work. So I thought I want to popularize this idea, make something, make a way for people to move into this world and make it mainstream. So I got together with Teresa Chung, who's a best-selling author in the UK, and wrote this book called The Premonition Code. And in the book, it refers to a website that Mark Boccuzzi at Windbridge Institute built. And we'll be built it together, but he did the amazing coding. And also I created this course called The Science and Practice of Intuition that's on Insight Timer. I wanted to get thousands of people coming to the website and checking on their own ability to precognitively determine targets or do controlled precognition or precognitive remote viewing, whatever you want to call it. And it worked. I got a lot of people on there. And so I'm going to show you the results. Here's the website, in case you're interested, thepremonitioncode.com/tester. So generally what people do is they click on this, and they go through 6 steps. Now, they don't have to do these steps. These are outlined in the book, and they're all just standard remote viewing preparatory steps. But I have them there so they have to click through them, and it takes a while. It would be taking a while for them to have to do one trial after another, so it makes them stop and maybe hopefully get into a place of actual reception of information. So there's 6 steps. I'm not going to show them all to you. Eventually you get to this one where it says, okay, you're on step 6. It's time to experience the target. It offers 2 profiles of the target. There's actually 2. There's more than 500 or maybe now 600 targets in the database. And they're mutually exclusive in terms of the elements in the target. So I don't want to show the actual picture because I'm worried about displacement, right? There's some versions of this where you would see 2 pictures and you have to choose. And of course, you might choose them based on precognition of either of them. So I'm showing, these are all 8 different elements, like words, symbols, and ideas, vegetation and food, space or sky. Slightly different than the version where you might see curvilinear versus straight, like Dale was talking about. This is more like what is there, what is in it, like a field approach. So in this example, we have a lot of elements here. We have 1 element there. This is words, symbols, and or ideas. Space, sky, structure, hill, electricity or fire, energy, water, and subjects, like sentient subjects. Which one of these, A or B, let's take a vote, is going to be the next picture that you see? What's the target going to be? Is it going to be A? Raise your hand. Literally 4 or 5 people. Is it going to be B? Oh, we are psychic. Yes, so here's the target. It's a quote by Lise Meitner. She says, life need not be easy, provided only that it is not empty. And then at the bottom it says, remember to send loving feelings back to yourself while you were working. So the idea is to continue this context of loving feelings and potentially moving that through time. So the results, thank God, there's like some straightforward non-psi missing results somewhere, right? So the results are basically, if I just take everyone who did the first 5, their first 5 trials that they ever do on this thing, and these are people, a lot of people just do 1 trial. Okay, these are people who did 5 trials. The black line is the people who do something called testing, which is exactly the same in every way to this other thing called practice, except that one is called testing and the other is called practice. This is the mean proportion correct. The red line is chance. And you can see that the ones doing testing are peaking here on day 3. That's actually independently significant versus chance. The practice people are down here. These are largely different people. The ones who are doing testing are mostly remote viewers who actually have experience, as far as I can tell, and these are not. But in any case, the means are either above chance or borderline. Real quick, last result. What I'm most interested in the bias, again, in the bias in the data, you compare the top 8 mostly incorrect pictures or targets with the top 8 mostly correct targets. You get this huge effect where if I ask a bunch of people on Mechanical Turk to rate which, without knowing about this, what's correct or incorrect, what's interesting, the ones that are most interesting are the ones that are getting correct. People are getting correct, the ones that aren't, they're not. Similar to what other people have said in the field, but just quantified. So one of our biggest biases, I think, is forgetting that psi itself can have biases, like interesting targets, and also forgetting that practice helps most skills, like music or athleticism or anything else. So can we use tools to get over such biases and strengthen the signal? Perhaps so. And I want to move towards a world that's more like this in relationship to precognition. This is the movie Arrival. If you haven't seen it, don't even listen to the next word I'm saying and go see it, because it is a beautiful movie. And it's about a woman who saves the world using precognition and science, and how awesome is that? And Rachel Carson says, the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for our destruction. So that's very motivating. Thank you to all the participants, the PsyQ, Psy3 volunteers, ION's research team, Dean, Raiden, Arnaud Delorme, Teresa Chung, the Bial Foundation, Focus at Will, Experiment.com, Jeff and Leslie Ulsner, and the Hummingbird Foundation. And you, thank you very much for having me here and for listening.
We only have time for a couple of questions.
I love that you're doing this work in psychology. There's a lot of noticing that affirmations can have the opposite response, and unconditional love. I actually have a long article about the myth of unconditional love. Most people actually cannot experience unconditional love. So it may be possible if you try a different hypnotic suggestion, it might be more effective.
Maybe. The unconditional love, the guy who was the hypnotherapist, Adam Crabtree, he wrote this beautiful book called Evolutionary Love and the Ravages of Greed. And he knew exactly how to speak about unconditional love in the way that didn't make it feel like a performance of something that you never experienced, but just a way that, so I kind of, the hypnotic suggestion is like 2 pages long. So it's not simple. Yeah.
Can you directly measure fear of psi, and can you tell the difference between that and a feeling that it's unnatural or unfair to get too many hits?
I can't. Can you?
No, it'd be nice to be able to do that, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. Maybe someone else would do that. My motivation is to, I don't know if that's helpful to do that. Because to me, my motivation is, like for instance, if you use something like unconditional love or training that reminds people like, okay, everyone goes through this, we're all humans. This is actually a group sport. Like remote viewing, I think, is very much a team sport. Recognizing that it's okay to be wrong, and basically like letting the patriarchy relax, not smash the patriarchy, but slowly relax over time into its grave. I think that is a better solution for almost all these things. And actually knowing like independently, oh, is this because I'm afraid, or is this because I don't want to get too many hits? I don't care. Let's just like love each other and get better at being human, because that's going to solve all that.
Thank you, Julia.